She looked me up and down, smirked, and said in front of everyone, "Is that really what you're wearing?" My son's wife thought she was clever, mocking the clothes I'd carefully chosen. The laughter stung. But what she didn't know was that every stitch of comfort in her life, including the roof over her head, was tied to me. Tell me, have you ever been mocked for something small, only to realize you held the biggest card in the room? Share your story in the comments. Now, let's get into today's tale. It was a Sunday dinner, one of those family gatherings that was supposed to feel warm and welcoming. I had taken time that morning to dress nicely, not flashy, just a simple blouse and skirt I'd always liked. The fabric was a little older, but it was clean, pressed, and it made me feel presentable. When I walked in, my son's wife glanced at me, her eyes scanning from head to toe. Then, in a voice meant for everyone at the table to hear, she chuckled, "Oh, wow, I didn't know we were doing vintage tonight." The table erupted in laughter, her friends, even a cousin or two, joining in nervously. My cheeks burned, my hands tightening around the gift I had brought. My son shifted in his seat but said nothing, and that silence cut deeper than the words. I sat down quietly, pretending to smile, though inside my heart ached. As the evening went on, the little jabs continued. She commented on my shoes. "Those must be comfortable because they're certainly not stylish." She even leaned across the table at one point and said, "We'll have to take you shopping one day, get you caught up with the times." Every remark was like a pinprick, small but sharp, designed to humiliate, and I endured it in silence, not because I didn't have words, but because I knew something she didn't. She thought the clothes on my back defined me. She thought age and simplicity equaled weakness. But what she didn't realize was that the very house she lived in, the walls she decorated, the kitchen she cooked in, the bedroom she called hers, was standing because of me. When my son and his wife had struggled to buy their home, it was me who stepped in. My savings, my years of sacrifice, had paid the down payment, and when the mortgage threatened to crush them, it was me who covered the payments, quietly, without fanfare. Month after month, I had ensured that roof stayed over their heads. She mocked my clothes while standing on the foundation I had built. And as I sat there, listening to her laughter, I realized something important. Sometimes you don't need to fight back with words. Sometimes you let the truth sit quietly, waiting, because one day when it reveals itself, the silence will be louder than any insult. That night, I held my tongue, but inside, I whispered to myself, "One day, you'll know whose name keeps this house standing." The mocking didn't stop with clothes. It never does. As the meal went on, she found new ways to turn me into a punchline. When I asked about her work, she smirked and said, "Oh, you wouldn't understand. It's all modern tech. Not your generation's thing." Laughter again. My son chuckled weakly, clearly uncomfortable, but still he said nothing. When dessert arrived, she leaned over my slice of cake and whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "Careful, it's sweet. Wouldn't want you falling asleep halfway through." More giggles circled the table. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the bitterness mask the ache in my chest. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the dismissal behind them. Every jab told me I was an outsider in the very family I had worked so hard to hold together. I thought back to the early years of their marriage, when money was tight and dreams felt fragile. They had wanted a home, a place to start their life together, but the bank had laughed at their credit, their limited savings. It had been me who stepped in. I'd written the check for the down payment, pulling from years of careful savings, built penny by penny through nights of extra shifts, weekends spent working instead of resting. And when even that wasn't enough, when the first year's mortgage payments threatened to drown them, who do you think covered the shortfall? It wasn't her parents. It wasn't some miracle lottery ticket. It was me. I tightened my own belt, cut corners in my own life, and wrote checks that kept them afloat. I remembered the day my son called, voice heavy with shame, asking if I could help. He had sounded broken, afraid they'd lose the house before they'd even built a home in it. I had told him gently, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you're okay." And I had, month after month, without complaint, without resentment. I wanted them to have stability, to have a chance. And now, here I sat in that very house, the house my money had secured, the house my name had kept alive, and I was being mocked for my shoes, my clothes, my age. She didn't know. She couldn't know. If she had, maybe she would have thought twice before sneering at me. Or maybe not. Arrogance has a way of blinding people to the hands that feed them. But I knew. And as her words floated over me, I let the knowledge settle in my chest like a shield. Because while she was busy decorating, playing hostess, and showing off, I carried the quiet truth. And truth, I've learned, has a way of waiting. One day the balance would tip. One day she would see exactly who kept this house standing. And when that day came, no smirk or jab would save her from the weight of it. So I smiled politely that night, letting her think she had won. But inside, I whispered to myself, "Keep laughing. You'll learn soon enough whose name is written on the foundation beneath your feet." The truth has a way of surfacing when people least expect it. And for her, it came on a Tuesday afternoon, a few weeks after that dinner. I had just finished folding laundry when my phone rang. It was my son. His voice was tense, hurried. "Mom, could you come by the house? There's something we need to talk about." And when I arrived, she was there too, standing in the kitchen with her arms folded, her face pale. On the table sat a stack of envelopes, mortgage statements, late notices, letters from the bank. She looked at me as though seeing me for the first time. "We didn't realize," she stammered. I thought he had it all under control." My son shifted uncomfortably. "We fell behind again, Mom. I'm sorry. We didn't want to bother you, but the bank's threatening foreclosure if we don't make a payment soon." I looked at the papers calmly. None of it surprised me. Life is expensive, and my son had always been better at dreaming than planning. But her, the shock in her eyes told me everything. Because in that moment, she realized that the home she flaunted, the kitchen she criticized my cooking in, the very walls she decorated for holidays, none of it was truly theirs. It was mine that kept it alive. "I've been covering the payments for years," I said evenly, placing a hand on the stack of letters. "Every month when you two couldn't, I stepped in. That roof over your head, it didn't stand because of new curtains or shiny furniture. It stood because I made sure it did." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at my son as though hoping he'd deny it, soften the blow. But he only lowered his head, shame written across his face. I let the silence hang, let the weight of the truth settle between us. For once she had no smirk, no clever remark, just the stunned realization that the woman she mocked was the very reason she had a home at all. Finally, she whispered, I didn't know." "No," I said softly but firmly. "You didn't ask. You didn't look past your own judgments long enough to see the truth. You thought my clothes made me small. But it was my sacrifice that made this house possible." The room was heavy, thick with a silence she couldn't laugh her way out of. She sank into a chair, her bravado gone, her face flushed with something she wasn't used to feeling, humility. I wrote another check that day, sliding it into the envelope, securing the house once more. Not for her, but for my son, for the family I had always protected. As I stood to leave, I looked at her one last time. "Next time you look at me, remember this moment. Remember who kept this house standing when you thought it was all yours." Her eyes followed me, wide and unsteady. For once, I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful, steady, undeniable. And as I walked out the door, I knew the mocking would never sound the same again. After that day in the kitchen, the air between us shifted. The woman who once smirked at my shoes, my blouse, my old-fashioned ways, now greeted me with a smile that was just a little too wide, her tone just a little too sweet. "Come in, let me take your coat," she said the next time I visited. She poured my tea before pouring her own, insisted I take the best seat in the living room, laughed a little too hard at my small jokes. To an outsider, it might have looked like respect, but I knew better. Respect is steady, genuine, built over time. What I saw in her eyes wasn't respect. It was fear. Fear of the truth she now carried like a stone in her pocket. That without me, her life could crumble. My son tried to bridge the gap, speaking softer, thanking me more often, as if gratitude could erase the silence he had offered at that dinner table. I appreciated the effort, but I didn't need apologies. I needed recognition, and whether they admitted it out loud or not, I had it now. At family gatherings, she no longer mocked. No more comments about my clothes, no sly digs about age or style. Instead, she turned her remarks into compliments. "Oh, I love that color on you. You always look so elegant." I smiled politely, answering with nods. But inside, I couldn't help but remember. I remembered the laughter that had once cut me down. I remembered the sting of being dismissed in front of everyone. And now, watching her force sweetness through gritted teeth, I saw the lesson written all over her face. It wasn't the blouse or the shoes that defined me. It was the fact that when the walls shook, it was my steady hands that held them up. The irony was almost too rich. She had spent so long trying to look superior, parading herself like the center of the family, when all along the foundation beneath her was mine. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. Life had already done the work for me. The mortgage notices, the late fees, the weight of that check, they had spoken louder than any revenge I could have planned. And in her quietness now, in her forced sweetness, I found my peace. Because she had learned what she never expected, that the woman she mocked was the very reason she had comfort, stability, a home. Every time she smiled too quickly, poured my tea too carefully, I reminded myself, this isn't respect, this is recognition. And sometimes recognition is enough, because once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. And she would never again look at me and see just old clothes. She would see the signature that kept her life from falling apart. In the quiet of my own home, I thought back on it all. The laughter at the dinner table, the sting of her words, the silence of my son, and then the way her face drained of color when she saw those mortgage statements spread across the kitchen table. It struck me how fragile arrogance really is. One moment it struts confidently, sneering at others. The next it crumbles under the weight of truth. She had mocked my clothes, believing fabric could define worth. But clothes fade, styles change. Sacrifice, on the other hand, does not. Years of saving, of working, of quietly handing over checks when no one else could. That's what built this family's stability, and no smirk could erase it. For so long, I had been silent about the help I gave. I never wanted to hold it over my son's head, never wanted him to feel like he owed me his life. That's not what mothers do. We give because we love. We sacrifice because we want our children to stand tall. But somewhere along the way, my silence became their blindness. They forgot the foundation beneath their feet. They assumed the house they called theirs had always been secure, that they had earned it alone. And so she had the arrogance to laugh at me, to dismiss me, not realizing that every lamp she switched on, every hot shower she took, every quiet night in her bed was made possible because of me. I didn't need revenge that night at the dinner table. I didn't need to shout or throw her words back at her. Life did it for me. The late notices, the bank's letters, the trembling in her voice as she whispered, "I didn't know." That was justice enough. And I realized something important. Dignity doesn't come from being the loudest in the room. It comes from knowing your worth, even when others don't. It comes from carrying the truth quietly, letting time reveal it when the moment is right. That moment had come for her. And though I hadn't sought it, I welcomed it, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because now, every time she looks at me, she doesn't see old clothes or outdated shoes. She sees the signature that saved her home. She sees the truth that arrogance tried to bury. She sees the woman she underestimated, standing tall. And for me, that's enough. I don't need her compliments. I don't need her forced politeness. I carry my own peace now, knowing that the very thing she mocked me for, the simplicity of my life, was what gave me the strength to provide for theirs. And maybe, just maybe, she'll think twice before dismissing someone again, because you never know who's been paying the mortgage. So here's what I've learned. People will sometimes judge you by what they see on the surface, your clothes, your age, the way you carry yourself. They laugh, they dismiss, they forget. But what they don't realize is that true worth often lies in what they can't see, the years of sacrifice, the quiet giving, the strength that holds everything together. My son's wife thought she was clever, mocking my clothes, but she forgot one thing. Those same clothes were worn by the woman paying the mortgage under her roof. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't loud or vengeful. It's simply letting the truth speak when the moment comes. Tell me, have you ever been mocked, only for the tables to turn? Share it in the comments, and stay with us. There are more stories of quiet justice ahead.